Alright, so James Gunn's DCU Clayface has been delayed and it has been pushed back to October 2026, according to this report. This report dropped about a week ago. Yeah, it dropped about a week ago. So, newish. It's from Cosmic Book News, who I get quite a lot of stuff from, quite a lot of news and scoops and insights. So I think they're fairly reliable. Clayface has been delayed and pushed back to October. So, James Gunn's DCU just hit another scheduling snag as Clayface has officially been delayed. The move follows Lanterns also getting pushed back, though Supergirl remains locked in for its summer 2026 release, and Gunn is set to start filming Man of Tomorrow soon for its 2027 release. Yeah, they definitely want to get Supergirl out there, and they definitely want to get Man of Tomorrow out with as little troubles and complications as possible. Obviously, as that's a pretty big movie in this universe, Superman 2 is a pretty big movie in this universe, and they definitely want to get Supergirl out as well, as effortlessly as possible, because that's definitely going to lead into Man of Tomorrow in some capacity. The update comes via Variety as Warner Brothers reshuffled several major release dates across its slate. Clayface delayed to October 2026. So, Clayface was originally scheduled to hit theatres on September 11th, 2026. Warner Brothers has now moved the film back 2 months to October 23rd, 2026. Over 2 months. I mean, that's more like a month and a half. Sorry. 2.5 months. Yeah. That is quite a significant pushback. The film centres on the Batman villain Clayface, a shape-shifting character being reimagined as a body horror project with comparisons made to the work of David Cronenberg. It's directed by James Watkins from a screenplay by Mike Flanagan and Hossein Amini. Yeah, I am quite interested about this film on a sort of premise basis. I don't know loads about Clayface as a character overall, and I know he's definitely not super popular, definitely not a mainstream type of character. This is definitely going to be a niche kind of movie here. Tom Rhys-Harris stars as Matt Hagen, an actor whose life changes after a horrific disfigurement, while Naomi Ackie plays plays the scientist he turns to for help. The film is produced by James Gunn and Peter Safran, alongside Matt Reeves. Oh, okay. And Lynn Harris. Okay, so Matt Reeves is dipping his toes into the DCU. As a producer, that's interesting. That is interesting. Maybe they'll be able to, Reeves and Gunn, maybe they're actually having face-to-face conversations about what they're going to do with Batman. Because James Gunn needs to get Batman in there, in his universe in some capacity. I mean, we're supposed to be getting Brave and the Bold in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, in the reasonable future, realistic future. We're getting Man of Tomorrow. So who knows what that movie's gonna look like though. So yeah, the new date puts Clayface up against an untitled Jordan Peele project from Universal, as well as the Rosamund Pike thriller Wife and Dog. Warner Bros. Shifts Practical Magic 2. With Clayface vacating its original September slot, Warner Brothers has moved Practical Magic 2 into the September 11th, 2026 date. The sequel reunites Nicole Kidman and Sandra Bullock and is directed by Suzanne Bier. I am not aware of Practical Magic. I have not seen Practical Magic, so I don't know what that's about. So yeah, Clayface has been pushed back by a whole 2.5 months. I was somewhat expecting to hear this. I was expecting to hear some sort of issue. I don't know. I could just feel it, man. I could just feel it, you know. But I mean, I am interested in this. I'm skeptical of the impact it's going to have on the DCU or James Gunn. I'm doubtful of what results it's going to bring, how much of a win it's going to be for Warner Brothers and James Gunn and James Gunn's DC universe. But who knows? I mean, we've had Marvel pulled off Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's a multi-billion-dollar trilogy at this point. You know, they pulled off Ant-Man. I mean, my point is, Marvel were able to take super niche, kind of out of pocket, kind of misfit characters that didn't really fit into the main universe. They took these sort of outer rim characters and they managed to turn them into billion-dollar franchises, you know. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy, before the movie came out, nobody knew who the Guardians of the Galaxy were. Super niche comic book characters, you know, very low-key, you know, definitely not mainstream characters, definitely not Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Hulk level characters. But, you know, the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogies made like $4 billion. Same with Ant-Man. Ant-Man was a very niche, unknown, very low-key comic book character, and the Ant-Man trilogy, well, it's Ant-Man, and then the two Ant-Man and the Wasp movies, they've made billions of dollars as well. So we could end up getting sort of a Guardians of the Galaxy type thing happening here with Clayface, and it could end up being like a surprise smash hit and could make $1 billion, and then they make like a whole ass Clayface trilogy. That could be fun, and that could happen, and I'd be open to seeing that. So Zack Snyder remains in the headlines. He's been in the headlines for a few weeks now. So Zack Snyder shares new Ben Affleck Batman Dark Knight image. So there is speculation, and it is fairly rampant speculation, that we will be seeing the return of Zack Snyder to DC in some capacity, format, which could happen, and there could be a few ways that happens. I've put forward the idea that the way he gets back into DC is that if Netflix if Netflix acquires Warner Brothers or Warner Brothers merges with Netflix, whatever the deal is, but if the Warner Brothers Netflix deal does go through, I believe that's probably Snyder's best way back in. But there's a few ways. There's a few ways that it could happen. So, Zack Snyder has shared another striking image of Ben Affleck as Batman, this time emphasising the cinematic craftsmanship behind the shot and noting he's the Dark Knight. It is a cool image. Let's just admire this image for a second. That is quite a cool image. It's reminding me of the iconic shot of Christian Bale's Batman in The Dark Knight, standing over the rubble, looking down, and standing over the rubble of when Rachel is tied up in the warehouse, and the warehouse blows up. It's giving off those vibes. Posting the black and white image to Instagram, Snyder wrote, "Wide lens, Dark Knight. Leica MD, 28mm, f1 7.7. Sorry if I butchered the filmmaking terminology, the camera terminology there. The photo captures Affleck's Batman emerging through smoke on set, framed with a wide lens that amplifies scale and atmosphere. A visual style Snyder frequently used throughout Batman v Superman and Justice League. Snyder's Batman and The Dark Knight Returns. The timing of the post has again fueled speculation about Snyder's future with the character. We've been told that if Netflix does end up acquiring Warner Brothers Discovery, Snyder could finally move forward with a live-action adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns, a project he has long said he wants to make comic accurate. Yeah, that's what he's after. If he returns, if Snyder returns to DC, he wants The Dark Knight Returns, and he wants to do it comic accurate, and he wants it bloody and gritty and dark, and I'm all for that, to be honest. I'm all for that, though I also think we should let Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson have their trilogy. I also think we should do that, because I'm very excited for the Batman Part 2, and so are most DC fans. Big fan of that first one. Didn't think I was going to like that first one. I was very sceptical. Didn't like the choice of Robert Pattinson as Batman. Didn't like the way he looked. And I was very sceptical about that movie. And I was very pleasantly surprised. So, yeah, I think we should let Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson have their trilogy, get their trilogy out of the way. According to our sources, Snyder's preferred Batman for that story remains Ben Affleck, who would be willing to return under the right circumstances. I think Ben Affleck does make a good Dark Knight Returns Batman. He definitely does. Paramount outcome could bring full Snyderverse return. Meanwhile, if Paramount ends up winning the battle for Warner Brothers Discovery instead of Netflix, we're told the Snyderverse could be back in full play, not just a standalone Batman project. Our insiders recently filled us in that Zack has new ideas for the Justice League sequels, which would also bring back Henry Cavill as Superman, Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and Jason Momoa as Aquaman. This is crazy, bro. This is crazy that we're actually, like, genuinely considering this in 2026. This is wild. Snyder's recent wave of DCEU image drops, including Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Flash, Cyborg, Steppenwolf, and now multiple Batman posts, is said to be part of an effort to gauge fan response and engagement. So far, the response has been loud. Yeah, Snyder's got a big fan base. He's got a very big fan base. There's a lot of Snyder bros. a lot of fucking Snyder bros out there, man. And he's got a large fan base. I mean, there are people who really love Man of Steel and BVS and his cut of Justice League, the Snyder cut of Justice League. There are some super fans of those films, and he's got a huge fan base. And I think his public stock with his reputation with DC fans currently is probably higher than James Gunn's. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. But maybe I'm not wrong. And James Gunn's contract runs out in 2027, I believe. Because I believe he's been given a 5-year contract, something like that. Something like a 5-year contract. And I believe it expires in 2027. Now, obviously, he's got all these grand plans. And if the universe ends up being a giant success, that contract will get renewed for another 5 years or whatever. But, you know, Superman didn't actually make money. Superman broke even. Supergirl's not going to do better. Supergirl's going to do the same, or it's going to do worse. And if it does worse, then it will actually lose money. Clayface is a grey zone, a grey area. I think Clayface is a giant grey area. And then there's going to be Man of Tomorrow, which is a Superman 2. Probably not a $1 billion movie. I mean, given the first movie barely broke even, I don't see that there's any reason to assume that Man of Tomorrow is going to be a giant hit. And I don't think... And when I mean a giant hit, I do mean over like $1 billion, because we have to remember that these days, all of these movies cost like 200, 250, sometimes 300 million. So when I say a huge hit, I mean like 1.5 billion. Because if you're spending 250 M's to make a movie, you're then going to spend that amount of money, so 250 M's, you're then going to spend that on marketing, promoting, advertising. That's 500 million. So you would want a movie with those kinds of costs to make $1 billion. You'd want that to make $1 billion. You'd need to make 500 to get your money back, and then you would want to make $1 billion, wouldn't you? If your movie costs $250 million and then you have to spend that again on promoting and marketing and advertising, you want to make $1 billion. That's the thing. So James Gunn's contract expires in 2027. The Warner Brothers Netflix deal would be finalising next year in 2027, summer 2027. It could end up going the other way, and it could end up going towards the direction of Paramount. But I think the timings would still line up the same. So who knows what's going to happen? Are we going to have two competing cinematic universes at the same time? Are we going to have someone taking somebody else's job? Are we going to have two guys competing for the top job? And it's just going to be a matter of who can win bigger at the box office and who can get more bums on seats, that sort of thing. Who knows, man? Who knows? Who knows? So, yeah, that's all I wanted to cover for today. So, yeah, see you later.